She thought I was powerless, that I was just a quiet, agreeable man who would always play along, always keep the peace, always give in. And for a long time I did exactly that. I kept my head down, smiled when I was supposed to, and let her believe she was in control of everything. But what she didn't realize, what she couldn't even imagine, was that every time she dismissed me, every time she laughed at me, every time she said I had no power, she was giving me exactly what I needed: time, patience, and the kind of quiet resolve that only reveals itself when you're pushed too far. My name's Daniel. I'm not flashy, I'm not loud, and I've never been the center of attention. I work from home as a systems analyst, which basically means I stare at numbers and data all day while drinking way too much coffee. My friends would describe me as calm, maybe even boring. And honestly, that's fine with me. I like quiet. I like stability. I like knowing the bills are paid, the fridge is stocked, and the Wi-Fi works. But my girlfriend, Melissa, she thrived on chaos. For her, life wasn't worth living unless it was dramatic, unpredictable, and preferably broadcasted to her group chat of equally dramatic friends. We'd been together for 3 years. At first she was magnetic, funny, spontaneous, full of energy. She had this way of making even a trip to the grocery store feel like an adventure. But over time, that same energy turned into something darker. She wanted control over every decision. Where we went, who we saw, how I spent my money, even how I decorated my own house, which, by the way, I bought before I ever met her. Slowly, my place stopped looking like my home and started looking like some Pinterest board she was trying to recreate. Beige pillows everywhere, fragile little trinkets that had no purpose, candles I wasn't allowed to light because they were decorative. My sturdy, practical coffee table, replaced with a glass one that couldn't even hold a pizza box without wobbling. But the decorations were just the beginning. Melissa had this way of turning every disagreement into a performance. If I said no to something, it wasn't just between us. It became a story she'd tell her friends, painting me as the unreasonable boyfriend holding her back. Her friends, by the way, were her personal cheerleading squad. 3 women who laughed at every snide comment she made about me, who treated me like I was some background character in her movie. I called them the Sirens, because whenever they were around, Melissa became louder, meaner, and more determined to prove she was the star. The breaking point came one Thursday evening. I was in the kitchen making dinner. Just something simple: spaghetti and meatballs, garlic bread, a salad. I like cooking. It's calming, methodical, something I can control. Melissa walked in, already dressed to go out, her phone pressed to her ear. She was laughing, that exaggerated laugh she used when she wanted the person on the other end to know just how much fun she was having. Then she hung up and turned to me, grinning like a cat that just swallowed a canary. "Good news," she said, grabbing her purse. "The girls and I are going away this weekend. Lake trip. Leaving tomorrow." I blinked, still holding the wooden spoon I'd been using to stir the sauce. "Oh," I said. "Which lake?" She rolled her eyes like I'd just asked her to solve advanced calculus. "Why does it matter?" "I'm just curious," I said calmly. "If something happens, I'd like to know where you are." She let out a laugh that was sharp enough to cut glass. "Listen to him," she said, loud enough for Tiffany, one of the Sirens, who had just walked in, to hear. "He wants to know where I'm going. Like he's my dad." Tiffany laughed immediately, like she'd been waiting for her cue. And then Melissa delivered the line that would change everything. She put her hands on her hips, tilted her head, and with that condescending smirk said, "Stop acting like we're married. You don't get a say in where I go, or who I'm with." The Sirens burst out laughing, clapping each other on the shoulders like they'd just watched the greatest comedy sketch of their lives. I stood there, sauce dripping off the spoon, listening to the sound of their laughter echoing through my kitchen. And something inside me shifted. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity, the part of me that had been bending over backwards to keep the peace. It packed up, left quietly, and closed the door on its way out. I smiled at her. Not a real smile, an empty one, wide and cheerful, but hollow. "You're right," I said. "My mistake. They thought I was backing down. They thought I was powerless." Melissa even gave me a little pat on the cheek, the kind of gesture you give a child who doesn't understand how the world works. And then they all swept out of the house, their laughter trailing behind them. But the moment Melissa's car disappeared down the street the next afternoon, I got to work. Because she wanted to live like I didn't matter? Fine. She was about to find out just how much power I actually had. My first stop was my neighbor, Mrs. Carter. She was 79 years old, widowed, and had more cameras around her house than a Las Vegas casino. She knew everything that happened on our street, and she loved a good bit of drama. I brought her a slice of the pecan pie she liked, sat on her porch, and explained the situation. By the time I was finished, her eyes were sparkling with mischief. "That girl thinks she can just walk all over you," she said. "Don't worry, Daniel. I'll play my part." With Mrs. Carter on board, I returned home to begin what I called Operation Reset. The first step, boxing up every single thing Melissa had brought into my house. The throw pillows, the decorative bowls, the endless supply of candles, her clothes, her shoes, her makeup. I didn't just throw it all into bags, I categorized it. Everyday clothes, party clothes, shoes that looked like medieval torture devices, makeup labeled as face paint and goop. It was almost fun, seeing the mountain of her influence shrink down into cardboard boxes. By Saturday morning, the house was nearly cleared of her presence. And with each box that left, the place felt more like mine again. I hired a couple of movers to load everything into a storage unit. 1 month's rent, paid in advance. More than fair for someone who said I had no say in anything. Then came the fun part. Redecorating. I rolled up the beige rug and replaced it with something bold, something mine. I sold her delicate couch and bought a massive leather recliner sofa with cup holders big enough to hold a pitcher. The fragile coffee table, gone. In its place, a vintage arcade machine I'd been eyeing online. It didn't even work properly, but it lit up, and that was enough. The bedroom got the same treatment. Down came the macrame wall hanging. Up went a framed poster of a mountain range at sunset. Strong, solid, something that spoke to me. By Saturday afternoon, the transformation was nearly complete, and then I made the final move that would change everything. I went to the animal shelter. Just to look, I told myself, but an hour later, I was driving home with a 90-pound German shepherd named Max, loyal, protective, and completely unlike Melissa. When Max plopped himself onto the new couch and sighed like he'd just claimed his throne, I knew I'd made the right decision. That night, as I sat on my couch with Max's head resting on my lap, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace, real, unshakable peace. And for the first time, I looked forward to Melissa coming back, because she thought I was powerless. But she was about to learn that I had changed everything. I didn't even argue with her. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew that words weren't enough anymore. People like her, people who laugh at your silence, don't understand explanations. They understand outcomes. The room was buzzing with her friend's laughter, but it felt like everything slowed down for me. My heartbeat was steady. My face still carried that same quiet smile. What they didn't know was that every time she mocked me, every time she dismissed me as powerless, I was learning. I was watching. I was becoming sharper. That night, while she celebrated her so-called independence, I started making real changes. Quiet ones, invisible ones, the kind no one notices until it's too late. I didn't storm out. I didn't make a scene. I just let her think she had won. That's the beautiful part about being underestimated. Your every move is unexpected. The first step was discipline. While she wasted her nights on parties, I spent mine studying. Finance, psychology, negotiation, influence, anything that gave me an edge. Every insult she threw at me only fueled my late nights. I turned her laughter into momentum. Her mockery became my alarm clock. Weeks passed, and suddenly I wasn't the same person. My shoulders straightened. My voice carried weight. Even the way I entered a room began to shift. And people noticed. Not her, though. She was too busy playing games, too busy soaking in the attention of strangers who didn't care about her tomorrow. But others saw me differently. The colleagues who once ignored my ideas began asking for my input. Friends who never listened suddenly leaned in when I spoke. It was like the universe had been waiting for me to take myself seriously, and once I did, everything else followed. Still, I said nothing to her. No explanations. No warnings. I wanted her to keep believing I was powerless, because that belief was my camouflage. Then came the second step, opportunity. I had been preparing quietly, but preparation means nothing if you don't step into the arena, and my chance came sooner than expected. A project opened up at work, something most people were too afraid to touch. It was risky, high stakes, and exactly what I needed. I volunteered, not with shaky confidence, not with doubt, but with the calm certainty of someone who had already seen the outcome in his mind. And here's the thing. The moment you bet on yourself, the world starts betting with you. The project didn't just succeed, it exploded. Numbers doubled, connections multiplied, and suddenly my name was being whispered in rooms I had never even entered. People who once forgot I existed were now calling me indispensable. Did she notice? Not at first. She still thought I was the same man who stood silent while she laughed. She still thought she had the upper hand. But slowly, the cracks appeared in her illusion. The parties didn't feel the same anymore. Her friends weren't laughing as loudly. And worst of all, when she spoke, the world wasn't orbiting around her like it used to, because people had started orbiting around me. I never raised my voice. I never tried to compete. I simply shifted my gravity, and everyone else adjusted. Then came the moment of truth. She walked into one of the very places I now had influence over, expecting the same attention, the same spotlight. But something was different. People's eyes didn't follow her. They turned toward me. She was still speaking, still trying to command the room, but her voice sounded smaller. I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. I simply carried myself with the same quiet smile she had once mocked. And for the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes, because she realized I wasn't powerless anymore. That night, she tried to test me again. She pushed, she joked, she tried to belittle me in front of others. But this time the laughter didn't follow. Instead, silence filled the room. People looked at her, then at me, waiting for my reaction, and I gave her none. Because true power isn't in shouting back. It's in knowing you don't need to. When the night ended, she pulled me aside, her voice trembling just enough for me to notice. "You've changed," she whispered. And I smiled, the same way I had smiled months ago when she told me I was powerless. Only now she knew that smile meant something else entirely. I didn't need to say the words out loud, but she heard them anyway. I changed everything. The best part? I hadn't just changed for her. I had changed for me, for the life I wanted, for the respect I deserved. And once you build that foundation, no one, not even the people who doubt you most, can shake it. The journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. Because power isn't something you claim once and keep forever. It's something you prove every day, not to others but to yourself. So while she wrestled with the shock of seeing me transformed, I kept moving forward. Doors were opening faster than I could step through them. Opportunities that once felt impossible were now landing in my hands. And all because I decided to stop fighting her words and start building my reality. Her laughter had tried to define me, but my silence redefined everything. And that's the truth most people never understand. Silence isn't weakness. It's preparation. It's the pause before the storm. And when the storm finally comes, it doesn't ask permission. People often ask me what the turning point was. Was it the night she laughed at me in front of everyone? Was it the moment I decided to stop defending myself and start building myself? Or was it the day I saw her face fall when she realized the world no longer revolved around her? The truth is, there wasn't just one turning point. Change doesn't arrive in a single dramatic moment. It comes in layers, tiny decisions, invisible victories, and quiet sacrifices that stack up until the weight of them crushes the old version of you. For me, the laughter was just the spark. But the fire came from what I built afterward. See, people think power is about control. Control over others, control over situations, control over outcomes. But the real power, the kind that lasts, comes from controlling yourself. And that's what she never understood. She thought mocking me would break me down. But what it did instead was force me to master myself. Discipline became my secret weapon. While she lived for temporary thrills, I lived for tomorrow's certainty. While she sought validation from strangers, I sought strength from within. And soon enough, the gap between us wasn't just noticeable, it was unbridgeable. I remember a night when she tried to bait me again. She walked in, all dressed up, expecting admiration.
Expecting me to chase.
Expecting me to play the role I used to, but I didn't. I greeted her with warmth, yes. I wasn't cruel, but I wasn't desperate either. My eyes didn't linger, my attention didn't beg, and she noticed. That's when it hit me. Power isn't about forcing others to stay. It's about being someone they don't want to lose. She tried harder after that. Suddenly she wanted to know where I was going, who I was with, what I was working on. She started showing up to the very events she once mocked me for attending. She wanted to be seen next to me, as if standing in my shadow might return her the light she had lost. But by then, I wasn't doing any of this for her. Every step forward I took was for myself. For the man I was becoming, for the life I had promised myself in those late nights when no one believed in me. And that's why the shift was so unshakable. Because if you change for someone else, you can be manipulated into changing back. But if you change for yourself, there's no undoing it. There was one final moment, though. The night everything became undeniable. It was a gathering, a big one, filled with the same people who once laughed at me. The same circle where her voice once dominated, where my silence was treated like weakness. Only this time, the silence wasn't mine. It was theirs. I spoke, and the room listened. I shared my vision, my story, my lessons, and people leaned in. They nodded. They respected. And as I looked around, I saw it in their eyes. I wasn't invisible anymore. She sat there, trying to smile, trying to hide the storm brewing inside her. But I could see it. She remembered the night she told me I was powerless. She remembered the laughter. And now, she was sitting in a room where everyone saw me as the one with the gravity she once claimed for herself. Did I throw it in her face? No, I didn't need to. Because the most powerful revenge isn't proving them wrong to their face. It's living in a way where their opinion no longer matters. When the night ended, she approached me quietly. No crowd, no laughter, no performance. Just her and me. You're different now, she said. Her voice didn't carry arrogance anymore. It carried something else, something she had never shown me before. Respect. I looked at her, and for the first time I realized I didn't feel the need to answer. I didn't feel the need to explain my journey, or remind her of her words, or seek closure. Because closure isn't something someone else gives you. It's something you create when you finally outgrow the version of yourself that needed their approval. And in that moment, I knew I had outgrown her. Not with bitterness. Not with resentment, but with peace. The truth is, she was right about one thing. Back then I was powerless. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I could become. I let others define my worth, and I stayed silent because I thought silence meant defeat. But she never realized that silence can also mean preparation. And while she mistook my patience for weakness, I was building something unstoppable. Now, I carry myself differently, not because I want to prove her wrong, but because I finally proved myself right. And if there's one lesson in all of this, it's this. Never underestimate the person who stays quiet while others laugh. Because silence isn't surrender. It's the sharp inhale before the roar. She thought I was powerless. But in reality, I was just waiting for the right moment to reveal the strength I had been building all along. And when that moment came, it didn't just change her perception, it changed everything. Because the greatest transformation isn't when others see you differently. It's when you finally see yourself for who you truly are. And once that happens, nothing and no one can take it away.